Are they looking for your udders?
They are, I think. They
Ain't gonna find them there.
They're not down there. Okay, I want to do this. Still confused. Welcome back to Sow, Grow and Cook. It's the middle of May and there's so much going on. It's really full on. We're transplanting seedlings, we're planting things in the polytunnel and outdoors, we're moving sheep around, we're moving goats to browsing areas. It's just really, really busy. Sit back and relax and I'll show you what we've been getting up to this week. I pulled a lot of rhubarb from the garden. I'm going to make some rhubarb strawberry jam. Now I had to leave the rhubarb out because it started to rain quite heavily and then it was lunchtime, so I had some lunch, and by the time I came out the sun came out and the leaves are all wilted, but that doesn't really matter because I'm going to cut off the leaves anyway, and I'm going to wash and chop up the rhubarb for turning into jam. But it's a nice little harvest there. And I'm also planting some of the tomatoes today in the polytunnel. This is where the ducks were living during the winter after those terrible storms blew their duck pen away. We've since had it fixed, but I had to do a few amendments to get it ready for planting because they'd compacted the soil quite badly. I've added some good composted goat manure and I've forked it over a bit just to loosen it up. I normally do no dig, but it was so hard and so compacted I had to do a little bit. But I'm hoping that we're not going to have to put them in here again next year, and then I won't have to fork it again next year. Anyway, so I'm planting the Crimson Crush and the Ukrainian Purple here. So we'll get started. Well, actually we'll continue because I got started yesterday. As I plant each of these tomatoes in its own little space, which is roughly 60 centimeters or 2 feet apart, I'm putting a good handful of proprietary compost to kind of help get the roots established and to give them a little bit of extra easy to access feed for young plant roots. There's plenty of organic material in the bed already. There's goat manure and duck manure and chicken manure and bedding and things. So as it gets watered and they grow, they've got tons of nutrients in the soil. It's just that little bit extra when they first get planted. So I'm doing sort of 3 across. And I'm going to get as many in as I can. I'm doing the Crimson Crush and the Ukrainian Purple tomatoes. And these will form the basis of my canning tomatoes. The tomatoes I turn into passata and put in jars for the winter. They're really good to eat fresh as well, but I'll have some other tomatoes on the narrow bed opposite the path there. When these tomato plants are established and start growing a little bit more, I'm going to tie some baling twine onto them and tie them up to the crop rails so that I can interweave them and they can grow upwards. I'll carry on till the space is filled, and I expect to plant 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 24 on this side, and I've got some borlotti beans that I'm just going to plant at the end here, and then I've got a whole long narrow strip on that side which will hold some of my other variety of tomatoes, and a couple of melons for the Transatlantic Melon Challenge. Check out Jane Kelly and the Lake Effect Gardener. They're putting up some sort of challenge. This has happened before, and I'm gonna give it a go and see if I can grow some little Minnesota midget melons, which I've got growing in pots currently. So I'll just get on with this and I'll be back to show you what I'm cooking up in the kitchen. So that rhubarb I picked earlier in the video, I've turned some of it into, well, I'm turning some of it into rhubarb and strawberry jam. I've put half the amount of rhubarb, so that would have been about 500 grams, roughly a pound, and roughly a pound of strawberries that I had in the freezer from last year, which makes up about a kilogram. It's a little bit more than a pound each. And then I've put a kilogram of jam sugar, which has got some added pectin in it, because I like a thicker set and I don't like to boil it forever before it gets thick. I kind of like to have a fresher tasting jam, and using pectin means that I don't have to boil it for quite as long, which kind of then means I get a fresher tasting, more fruity tasting jam. So I'll show you when it's all done. I've got some secondhand jars and I'll use those. Meanwhile, out in the vegetable garden, amongst my other jobs, I've been doing quite a lot of weeding. I took advantage of the rain to soften up the soil. It makes weeding so much easier. Everything's just kind of loosened up. Weeds that are sometimes entrenched in the soil come up really, really easily. Oops, got a potato there. To get my spade, I think, to dig that one up. The soil becomes soft and crumbly after the rain. I've done quite a lot today. We have a lot of creeping buttercup, which likes our sort of wet clay soil, and they've got particularly entrenched roots. It's hard to just pull them up on their own. You have to either get a little hand trowel or sometimes if they're growing close to something else, I just cut into the plant below the root and pull them out that way. Because otherwise, if you use a little hand trowel, it can be too big a tool and you might end up pulling out the root of the plant that you want to keep in the ground. So sometimes just sticking the knife in the ground. Let's have a little demonstration. Let's look in the strawberry patch. Okay, here we go. We've got strawberries growing here, and we've also got creeping buttercup. Now if I was to get my little hand digger, I'd end up pulling up the strawberry plant, and I don't want to do that. So I'm taking my knife and I'm just taking it to the base of the plant, cutting down. Now it doesn't take all the root out, and it'll probably come back, but if you keep doing that, it certainly stops the plant from photosynthesizing, and it'll weaken the plant and it should eventually die. Here's another one. Oh, that one helped cut out the roots as well. There's another one. They seem to like to grow really close to other plants. I wonder if it's almost like a clever strategy. Hide yourself amongst the other plants and maybe you won't get pulled out. Maybe I'm just overthinking this one. Sleep on the job again, Stella. There we go. Big wheelbarrow full of weeds and rhubarb leaves. Put on the compost heap. Time to fill up the compost bin. There are different layers in here. I've got some goat bedding and manure and some duck bedding and manure and some old straw and lots of fresh green succulent weeds. Everything will eventually rot down. I'm not in a massive mega hurry, but we always seem to have some compost that's ready.